Let's go to my next guest next. I want to talk about Ukraine, but actually I'd be interested to get his thoughts on this report. Actually, Mr Gifford is a former British volunteer fighter in both Ukraine and actually he fought in the Middle East as well against ISIS. He's the author of Fighting Evil. Very, very good afternoon to you, Mesa.
Good afternoon.
Thank you so much for waiting on the line. I just wondered if you want to give your response actually to that report into the Salisbury Novichok poisonings and indeed the modus operandi of Vladimir Putin, a man I'm sure you are a great fan of.
Well, it shows that we've underestimated Russia for a while. I think the attack on the Skripals was a bit of a wake-up call to how much of a rogue nation Russia is.
Yeah.
I remember back to the actual murder, in 2006 of Alexander Litvinenko, when plutonium-210 was squirted in a London hotel directly into his teacup.
Yeah.
That sort of nuclear substance was also brought onto planes full of innocent people. It was squirted inside a public hotel. That happened in 2006. We had this attack on the Skripals where a British citizen died. A British police officer was badly injured in hospital. That was a chemical attack on British streets. Yeah. And it is absolutely mad that in 2012, Cameron had Putin at the 2012 Olympics with him at the judo, trying to get sort of economic deals with Russia. We tried to normalize them. We tried to treat them like a normal country. But they haven't acted that way.
They are not. And we got the same thing with Xi Jinping in China as well. At the same time, as saying these are hostile nations. And we've got Europe basically saying, "Oh, let's buy a load of military hardware from America because Trump won't give it for free anymore and sell it and buy ourselves and then give it to Ukraine." And at the same time, buying oil and gas, which has come from Russia, funding the Russian military effort in Ukraine as well. I mean, we are in cloud cuckoo land on a lot of these issues, aren't we? And I do think a wake-up call is needed. Let's talk more specifically about Ukraine, because you've actually fought on the front line. First of all, can I ask you, because we're constantly told, and I get a lot of calls on this show, and I think, again, a lot of Kremlin talking points, I'm ashamed to say. People just saying, look, Ukrainian people, if they want peace, then they'll have to give up territory, fair enough, including territory. I mean, who are we kidding? That Russia is demanding as part of that original 28-point plan, which they haven't even conquered themselves after the best part of 4 years. But the idea that actually, Ukrainians don't want to fight. They're being conscripted. They're running away. They're leaving the country. They're fearful. They don't want to fight. Their will isn't there. It's just Zelensky trying to hold on to power. Is that your experience when you were fighting on the front line there?
Absolutely not. I mean, it's utterly absurd to describe the million-strong or thereabouts Ukrainian military as conscripted, as forced to fight. I mean, when I was in Kyiv when the war started, and I went down to a recruiting office, and I saw thousands of people. It was very similar to the scenes of when Nazi Germany, or indeed the First World War, began, and British men and boys sometimes rushed to the recruiting offices and were queuing around the streets to defend their country. Yeah. That's exactly what happened to Ukraine in those early days. And the front line is so brutal. It is so horrendous. The amount of deaths and casualties and the brutality on the front line that only someone that truly believes would actually fight. There'd be rioting in their trenches if Ukrainian soldiers didn't truly believe in what they were fighting for. So at the end of the day, this is a sovereign country on the edge of Europe invaded by a brutal imperialist power. And this is a country fighting for its very survival.
And that's the key thing there, isn't it? And they've never asked for anyone from another country to put boots on the ground and spill their own blood. Their own men are doing that, and their own civilians as well. Someone pointed out to me like, Israel's killed more civilians in Gaza than Russia has killed in Ukraine. Yeah, that's because Ukraine doesn't put its women and children sitting there, over its missile silos. Funnily enough, it actually tries to protect them. Many of them have left the country. They fled to be somewhere safe. In terms of the deals that have been on the table, this nonsense 28-point plan, clearly drafted by the Kremlin, the rather better, but still, I'd say questionable 19-point plan from the European Union. In terms of all the deals, all the talks, Witkoff and Kushner heading off to Moscow, and then there's going to be more talks in Florida today and over the weekend. I mean, is there any likelihood there's going to be a plan to which both Zelensky and the Ukrainians and Vladimir Putin can agree?
The original document drafted by the Russians themselves, effectively was a surrender document. It was the kind of thing that you would force on a defeated power, not one that has not only booted you out of Kyiv, but also Kherson, a place that I fought in, and currently has your army, your so-called Grand Army, advancing at literally the pace of a snail. No, Ukraine is holding on. It's under a huge amount of pressure, but they know better than anyone that the no deal is better than a bad deal. At the end of the day, just as Ronald Reagan said, you could have peace tomorrow. All you've got to do is surrender.
Exactly.
At the end of the day, when it comes to Ukraine, the Ukrainians do want to have peace. But the absurd demands of limiting their armed forces, of territorial...
Even in wartime, again, limiting their armed forces, basically more than halving their military, but even in wartime they would have to be halved. I mean, that's an absurd demand.
It's as I said, I think it's a Russian attempt to belittle the Ukrainians, to make their own people feel that they've won and they've defeated the Ukrainians. They've achieved their objectives of so-called denazifying the country, despite the fact that no political party within the Ukrainian party is right-wing, as far as I'm concerned, and the president himself is Jewish. I mean, this is a democratically elected country. It stands higher on the anti-corruption indexes than Russia does.
Yes, exactly.
Vladimir Putin has killed all his opposition politicians, and at the end of the day, as they've attacked us in the past on our streets in Britain, we've woken up to this reality where Russia has invaded Ukraine and now threatens all of Europe. And what we really should be talking about now as well is boosting our armed forces, giving money to MI5 to properly track Russian agents in the UK, and become incredibly serious about our own safety.
Well, indeed, we've talked an awful lot in the last week or two about threats to this country and whether or not we should be, especially if there's some of the saber rattling by Vladimir Putin. Earlier in the week, we were talking about Vladimir Putin saying, we don't want war with Europe. Wink, wink. Yeah, you did. You literally started a war in Ukraine. But we are ready for war if Europe does. Now, there's no question at all. There is no appetite for war in Europe, or indeed by the US. But at the end of the day, we may not have a choice about it.
Well, absolutely. I mean, Vladimir Putin was saying the day before he invaded Ukraine that he wasn't going to attack. We've had the absurd statements of those Russian agents saying they were only visiting Salisbury and the cathedral and all the rest of it. They're so blatant with their lies, and it
does have a lovely spire, though. It does have a lovely spire.
It has a truly lovely spire, and I'd encourage Russian visitors eventually in the future, when they have a more normal country, to come and visit. But I mean, at the state that it is, Russia is a terror state. It's one that funds terrorism abroad and attacks us at home.
Where are you in terms of the money that is in these European banks? $300 billion worth of Russian rubles invested. I mean, look, let's face it, London's banking system was sat on all the, basically is completely shored up by the dodgy Russian money for many years, was it not? But basically the idea that money should be seized, not just frozen, but seized and used to help Ukraine and help in that war effort. But threats from Medvedev, former Russian president, close ally of Vladimir Putin, not in the regime now, but basically saying that would be an act of war.
Well, I do think we should be funding Ukraine in that way. I mean, at the end of the day, we have lost America as a partner. It's given up its position as the leader of the free world, as far as I'm concerned, and lost a huge amount of soft power as a result of that. And Britain and Europe really do have to stand up. And we have to, as you said earlier, about the absurdity, about the sort of attempts of Europe to cozy up to Putin for many, many years, weakening our position and making ourselves completely reliant on their gas. We now need to start waking up to the reality that Russia is a threat to us, and that the world of the future is very violent and very chaotic. And unless we start investing in our armed forces and in our security, we will suffer terribly in the future. Yeah,
again, people say, look, this is our money, we shouldn't be spending abroad. This is an investment in our future as well, is it not? Mr Gifford, thank you so much for joining us. Former British volunteer fighter in Ukraine, author of Fighting Evil, fabulous book. Interesting to see, Philip, you were nodding along to an awful lot of that. It does kind of depress me quite a lot that Donald Trump doesn't get Ukraine the way he clearly gets the plight of Israel, where the predicament they're in. But but also that so many people are believing abject nonsense on social media about, it's a corrupt regime, it's not a democracy, it's all a foreign plot to put Zelensky in power, the Zelensky doesn't want peace, the Ukrainians don't want peace. I mean, it's just blatant, provable lies, a lot of this stuff.
Anyone who's been in conflict knows that nobody in their right mind ever wants conflict.
Especially people who've been in conflict.
Exactly. I have asked numerous people from lots of different backgrounds, how much corruption's going on inside Ukraine, and they say, it's no more really than we're seeing in any country across Europe, and Zelensky is dealing with it. And I've asked them.
The fact that we see people like his closest aide being sacked.
Correct.
I mean, that is proof that they're trying to get on top of it.
And
probably
they're doing very well. And,
probably no worse than Romania.
There is more. Well, it's no worse than what's going on in this country in many cases, and other countries around Europe. I've seen lots of it there, and therefore people are trying to fly that as a flag to try and undermine Ukraine. A lot of the bots that are behind it, the stories that are coming out, are Russian supported. And we have to recognise that if Putin gives up this conflict, the war stops tomorrow. If Zelensky gives up the fighting, then Ukraine ceases to exist, and the country and the people of the country will be further murdered and raped. And that's literally because Russia has done that.
That is what Russia does.
That's what Russia does.
Again, and I always say people again, it's just the idea that Ukraine they would fight for the best part of 4 years, lose all those men, and then go, absolutely fine.
But Putin will then come back. Putin will then come back for more, and that more will potentially have the individuals in this country having to be conscripted and go and fight them on the front line. So the Ukrainians are stopping that happening. We need to support Ukraine.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Dean. Love to hear your thoughts on all of that.